Good evening, everyone. It is March 1st, 2026, and this is the first test. I'm using OBS software. I'm just going to make some remarks about the events and things happening around the world very quickly. I should note this is 2026. The Iranian regime came to power. They overthrew the Shah in 1979. That was the fault of Jimmy Carter, who allowed it to happen because his idiot of a Secretary of State named Cyrus Vance told President Jimmy Carter that the Ayatollah Khomeini, who's leading the Shiite movement to overthrow the Shah in Iran, Cyrus Vance told President Carter that the Ayatollah was a saintly figure. The Ayatollah was in exile in Paris at that time. And once he came to power, he, of course, clamped down on anything resembling basic freedoms. Not that the Shah had been particularly um, uh, like how would you call this, a classical liberal Westerner. But the Shah was extremely favorable to the West, absolutely um, an ally of the West. And we should have allowed, I mean, if Jimmy Carter had had any sense in his head, he didn't. He's a Democrat, therefore he had no sense. If he'd had any sense in his head, he would have allowed the Shah to stay in power. Anyway, that was 47 years ago. Not quite, probably 46 plus years ago. The point was that we should have overthrown the Ayatollah as soon as they took hostages. I don't know if you recall. Many of you won't recall this because you weren't alive, but at the time, the now Islamic regime in Tehran literally kidnapped a bunch of American hostages. I think the number was 56. They held those hostages for 444 days. Somewhere in the middle of that process, probably about 100 days or so in, the wonderful people of Canada allowed us to use their embassy um, to exfiltrate a number of the hostages. So it wasn't 56, if that was the initial number. It wasn't 56 who'd been held for the entire 444 days. But the point was, as soon as that hostage crisis, if you will, was over, and it ended on Inauguration Day, 1981. So that would be January 20th of 1981, and that was when President Ronald Reagan took over for the execrable Jimmy Carter. Reagan had won in a landslide, and he had won promising a tough America. And of course, as soon as he was inaugurated, the Iranians backed down, released all the remaining hostages, and the hostage crisis was over. At that point, we should have said, as a matter of policy, we are now going, and we shouldn't have broadcasted, but we should have said, as a matter of policy, we are now going to do what we need to do to overthrow the regime in Tehran. That was 1980. I'm sorry, 1981. Therefore, 45 years ago. So this is 45 years, the action that Israel and the United States have taken toward the aim of toppling the Iranian regime is 45 years overdue. That should have been an aim of the Reagan administration, and certainly it should have been an aim of the George H.W. Bush administration, which succeeded the Reagan administration. It absolutely should have been an aim of the Bill Clinton administration, but we have to realize that Democrats are idiots and they don't do robust foreign policy because they're not interested in the triumph of uh, America around the world. So Bill Clinton, of course, would have been and was and turned out to be a hopeless case for in terms of foreign policy. Remember, it was he who had Osama bin Laden in his clutches and could have decided what to do with Osama bin Laden, and he let Osama bin Laden go, which led to eventually 9/11, 2001, a horrible, horrible crime against humanity with which many of us are familiar. But that was Bill Clinton. Then, of course, he was succeeded by George W. Bush, and George W. Bush had 9/11 to deal with. And at that point, he should have understood. Everyone sat there and wondered, my goodness, certainly it wasn't Saddam Hussein who had anything to do with 9/11, which, of course, is the stupidest possible conclusion. Yes, Saddam Hussein had a lot to do with 9/11. If you, again, if you recall at all what was happening, even if you weren't alive, you understand that when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, and I forget the exact year in which that happened, but it was in George H.W. Bush's presidency. Yeah, so before Clinton, Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, and George H.W. Bush cooked him out in Operation not Enduring Freedom, Desert Shield, Desert Sword, Desert something or other. The point was George H.W. Bush kicked Saddam Hussein's sorry, scrawny backside out of Kuwait, and so Saddam Hussein had a grudge. So this all had happened well before 2001 when 9/11 happened, and that was when Saddam Hussein did have plenty to do with 9/11, as did the Iranian regime. People under people see the surface of things. There's this notion that the Sunnis hate the Shiites hate the Sunnis, and they hate each other more than they hate Jews and the West. No, no, the Sunnis and the Shiites will operate together if an enemy is common, similar to the United States or Israel, and they will do what they can to try to damage those, quote, enemies, end quote, to damage us. And they did. So, yes, Iraq had a lot to do. Saddam Hussein had a lot to do with 9/11, as did Iran. We made it a point of ours to overthrow the regime in Iraq, Saddam Hussein, Baghdad, Iraq. And so we overthrew Saddam. Well, we should have just continued on and overthrown the dirtbag ayatollahs in Iran as well. And yes, Afghanistan did need to have some focus. We did that incredibly poorly because for some bizarre reason, we have this notion that we have to do, we can't just go in and win a war. We have to go in and maybe just try to kind of tip over um, the balance of power on our side. Maybe we win the war, but just barely. No, that's not how you fight a war. That's not how you win a war. The way to fight a war is to win the war. If your enemy scores a point against you, you want to score 20 points against your enemy. That's how it works. Until either the clock runs out and your enemy says, I give up, or whatever happens such that you can say that you have won the war, won it decisively, such that no one debates the question. No one questions whether it happened or not. You won the war. That's how you fight a war. You fight it to win it. Well, George H. George W. Bush did not do that. He didn't do it in Iraq, and he didn't do it in Afghanistan. And the fact that he didn't do it in Afghanistan allowed for the horrendous crime against humanity withdrawal from Afghanistan that Biden did eventually. And the fact that he didn't prosecute the war adequately in Iraq allowed President Obama. Oh, that's interesting. I almost did a fairly interesting slip of the tongue there. President Obama to um, produce, if you will, ISIS, because that's what Obama is the father of ISIS. Obama allowed ISIS to spring up and to kill who knows how many people. And understand, this is ISIS is a group of people who are just absolute barbarians. These are people who burn people alive, who crucify children, who bury people alive. These are disgusting. They're not animals because that would be unfair to animals. They are worse than animals. They are worse than subhumans. They're people choosing to be subhuman. It has nothing to do with anything ethnically. It's people choosing to be subhuman. And that's ISIS. And ISIS should have been stomped out. And of course, in Trump's first term, what did he do? Very near the beginning, he stomped out ISIS. This is what Trump does. Comes in and cleans up after like six different Democrat administrations. Okay, Obama, Clinton, Carter, and Biden. So four different Democrat administrations. And that's what Trump is doing here. And Trump also understands, as far as Iran is concerned, he has a window of opportunity. Trump has a window of opportunity that extends maybe as far as November of this year, November of 2026, which is the midterm elections, because who knows? The Democrats might be able to cheat their way into a majority in the House of Representatives and a majority in the Senate. And if that's the case, well, guess what? That's the end of any other Trump initiatives around the world. So we are March 1st today. Trump has March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October. So it looks like 8 months. If you figure that election day is the first Tuesday after the first Monday of um, November. So 8 months. That's the window of opportunity to clean up for four different Democrat administrations, of which two, at least two, were reelected. So 8 years of Obama, 8 years of Clinton, four each of Biden and Carter. So what have we got there? 16, 24 years of Democrat mismanagement, Democrat incompetence, Democrat corruption at the top of this nation's power structure, and Trump has 8 months to clean that up. Think about that for a moment. 24 years, and Trump has 8 months to clean that up. So that's what we're facing, and that's what Trump faces. And I don't know how to tell you anything different, but that's the dilemma he faces. And I don't know how he's going to accomplish it except in classic bull in a china shop mode, which is Trump's one of Trump's strengths. That's one of the things he's very, very, very good at. He's very, very, very good at some things. He's not so good at other things. He doesn't communicate well, but he's adapted his communication style to his communications weaknesses. So that's something that should be taken into account. Um, he doesn't express himself well. He is hilariously funny. He is an amazingly incisive analyst of things. Um, he acts, it seems fairly clearly in the nation's interests. In other words, if he could wave a magic wand and achieve the aims that he sets out to achieve, just about everyone in the nation who actually is sincerely concerned with the nation's best interests would say that those are the best aims. That they would, yes, they would approve if he could just wave a magic wand and achieve those aims. Get rid of the Iranian regime, maybe bring down the Chinese regime in favor of a non-Marxist regime, stop the Ukraine war. He did stop the Israel Hamas war, sort of. I mean, don't think he stopped it decisively enough, but that's a different question. But achieve these aims that he says he wants to achieve. Get rid of DEI domestically, which of course is something that needs to happen because that's just a cancer, and it needs to be expunged entirely. Um, and get rid of racism entirely in hiring, in academia, in Hollywood, in pop culture, and things like that. But those are things over which he has no control. You can't wave a wand and then make people not racists. So those are a few thoughts. We ranged around kind of across a broad spectrum of topics. But what I think I want you all to understand the most is this activity or this action that we're taking against Iran is way, way, way more than justified. It absolutely needed to happen, um, but it should have happened 45 years ago. And you heard my timeline starting in 1979 and going into the very early days of the Reagan presidency. That's when it should have happened, in the very early days of the Reagan presidency. Now that it's 45 years after that, this type of thing has an awful lot more risk than it might have had at that point. I do have to point out, I'm sorry, let me backtrack a little bit. I do have to point out that in the first days of the Reagan administration, the Soviet Union was still around and still looked to be a superpower. So Reagan may have wanted to bring down the Iran regime at that point. He may have thought it not possible, and there may have been some back channel communications between the Kremlin, um, then probably in the hands of either Konstantin Chernenko or Yuri Andropov. One of those two. Gorbachev came in later during the Reagan presidency, but the point being that Reagan may not have thought it was possible to bring down the Iranian regime in the context of the fact that the Soviet Union still was hanging on by a thread, but no one knew that it was hanging on by a thread. Soviet Union didn't come down until about 1990 or so, and that was when George H.W. Bush was in the presidency. He was in the presidency until January 20th of 1993. So it's possible that only George H.W. Bush had a window of opportunity, understanding that Clinton, being a Democrat, wouldn't do it because he's an idiot, and top level Democrats are idiots, and as corrupt as the day is long. So the window of opportunity may have been only literally from uh, when the Soviet Union fell, and then of course there's a period of time required to find out what happens after that dust settles, and January 20th of 1993. That may have been the only window of opportunity. But again, in a sane world, no sane world allows the regime atop Iran to survive as long as it did. Unfortunately, the world is plainly insane, and it did allow the Iranian regime to be in power all those 47 years. And that's obscene. That led to literally tens of thousands of terrorist attacks around the world, hundreds of thousands of deaths, war upon war upon war, um, endless evil. You could start talking about it today, and you wouldn't be finished talking about it in 10 years. That's how much evil the Iranian regime is responsible for, and that's why it should have gone onto the ash heap of history 45 years ago. Well, those are the thoughts for today. Just some thoughts on the day, and we are about 2 days. This is Sunday, so all the big stuff happened yesterday. So we're only 2 days into the 3-day rule. The 3-day rule says that any take that you have on an event uh, within 3 days of the event's occurrence is a hot take, and is subject to, well, you shouldn't trust it, put it that way. Uh, so those are my thoughts. I hope you appreciate them. Hope you like them. And if you have some comments, please leave me some comments. I'd absolutely love to hear what you're thinking about it. Um, and I will talk to you very soon.